Welcome to the future. At least in comparison to the rest of this video that has already been filmed. Also, I don't know why I went so heavily like movie narrator there, but let's just continue it on. Why don't we? What were you doing? Also, Caden's here to make this video better.
You good boy. You shake? Good boy.
I really feel like we need some like big, serious sounding swell now, like a this summer. An event you will not believe. Hey train, I'm trying to make a freaking movie here. An event in time itself. The end is near. Now we need some sort of like 40s newscaster voice to announce some sort of technological advancement.
This is the greatest scientific advancement since the splitting of the atom, certain to change the world.
Well, I don't know, man. This is not where I thought the intro of this video was gonna go. This is very a la the old gaming channel that I used to have, where videos often made no sense or trailed off far before they actually reached their point of existence, and in which case we're gonna be talking about what is going on with the Mustang. Now you might be thinking, you've made 2 videos about this before, you are stupid. First of all, we have established long ago I am stupid. There is no need to point out the obvious. Second of all, I may have figured out what is going on. Maybe. But let's try to take a video of what exactly has been happening and see if I can give an example of basically the problem that I'm trying to figure out in the first place. The problem being that the Mustang has issues idling. It will bounce around quite significantly at times, especially after it's been driven and is warmed up and is sitting at like a stoplight or something. It will sometimes literally idle down to like 400 RPM, almost die, and then spring back up. And sometimes it will literally just stall. And it seems like this is a very, very common issue with Coyotes from my research that has about 5 million different potential causes. So before we just straight up throw parts at it, how about we talk about all of the potential reasons this might be happening, and let's give an example for those of you who are not familiar, hopefully, of what's going on with it with a little bit of a cold start. Still idling at like 800, 850 RPM, something like that. My fuel is very low, as you can see. When it actually warms up and starts idling down towards like 650 or something like that, which is what it typically does. Right now the car's also on the stock tune. That's when you'll see a little bit more of the goofy idle issues. Well, the Mustang just sat there and idled perfectly, purring like a kitten, of course, because, like I said, it's mostly an issue when it's warmed up and, like, after driving most of the time. So, since that was a cold start, it wasn't really very apparent after, like, a few minutes of sitting there idling. So, hopefully you at least enjoyed that cold start. So, let's go ahead and talk about what the issue itself is. I know I didn't record an example, obviously, but I'll go ahead and do my best to explain what we've been experiencing with the Mustang and the potential things that it could be. So, hood open. Perfect. So, as far as Mustang issues go, basically what we're experiencing is a rough idle where it will basically drop down to a low RPM and then nearly stall or sometimes stall and jump back up to like 1,000 RPM and then slowly fall back down, start to basically have that rough idle that drops back down and then kick back up. And I experienced this issue, and originally I thought this was a fault of like the fueling because I ran Marble Mystery Oil through the tank And it was right when I did that I started having issues with the idle. And so originally I kind of blamed the Marble Mystery Oil, and I was like, I think that was affecting the fuel and basically was making it not run super great, which I knew it probably wasn't gonna run amazing on the Marble Mystery Oil in the first place, but I didn't expect it to do that, but that's what it seemed like was happening to me. Well, I've since run Seafoam through it, and it's continued having the issue for several tanks of fuel since then, so I don't think that that's what it was. Now, there are multiple potential things that this could be. I have them listed out. We'll talk about what is most potentially likely and what I don't personally think that it is. First and foremost, a fueling issue. I don't think it's a fueling issue because I feel like if it was like an obvious issue with fuel, I would be experiencing some sort of lean condition. And when monitoring the data log files while driving the car and everything, all of the AFRs that are basically being read out by like the Lambda systems on the car are seemingly fine. They don't seem to be running particularly lean or anything like that. And the fuel trim on the car is totally normal. It's not really trimming any excess amount of fuel. It's right where it should be. And also, I feel like if I was having something like a clogged injector or something like that, there'd be some sort of obvious misfire, and like not just at idle, but probably in general while driving, under situations where it's demanding more fuel, like at high RPM and stuff like that, and that just doesn't seem to be the case. I don't think that it is an air delivery issue in the sense that like the filter's clogged or anything like that. I just cleaned that out and everything. The mass airflow sensor has been cleaned like 100 times very thoroughly at this point. I do know that having a dirty throttle body can affect the way that Coyotes idle and stuff like that. But I took the throttle body off and I thoroughly cleaned it, made sure there was no carbon buildup or anything in it. There was really not much of anything. There's maybe like a little bit of carbon. I cleaned all of that off very, very thoroughly. I made sure that the gasket still seemed good. It was still nice and flexible and everything. It wasn't squashed or hard or anything for the throttle body. So, and it's just basically essentially an O-ring. That was totally fine. Put the throttle body back on. I still seem to be having the idle issues, but I haven't driven it much since doing that, and I put the stock tune on it right afterward. So it's possible it might be slightly better, but I don't think so, judging by the little that I have run it since doing that. On newer Coyotes, supposedly when putting an aftermarket tune on the car, people experience issues with the crank needing a relearn and throwing codes and stuff like that. I haven't experienced any codes being thrown like that, and that's typically, I think, more of an issue for the 15 and up Coyote cars, which are the Gen 2s. This is a Gen 1, so I don't really think that's what it is. Like I said, I've got no codes. I don't know why that would be the case. Now let's get into the potential things it could be. And this is where I said comes from the future in comparison to the rest of the video, because I recorded this video already a couple days ago at the same time that I did an oil change on this Mustang, as you saw part of in the beginning of this video, and you'll see later on in this video. So if I spontaneously change clothes, that would be why. So now let's talk about all of the potential things it could be. Number one thing, which is a huge thing that I've been thinking about, is vacuum leaks and or issues with the PCV system. I don't know why there would be issues with the PCV system. That might be something that I can explore in the future. I just don't know. But when it comes to vacuum leaks, I mean, I can't find any vacuum leaks just looking at it. I also sprayed some starter fluid around some obvious things, and the idle didn't increase or anything like that with the car. There was no sign of there being a leak there. So this is something that I am heavily suspecting. So what I'll probably do is disconnect one of the breather tubes that goes into the intake manifold right behind the throttle body, and do a smoke test, basically straight in, and see if I can see smoke leaking out of anywhere obvious. If not, then I guess it's not a vacuum leak, but that's one thing that I'm really heavily suspecting it might be. So we'll see. We'll have to do this in the future. I'm gonna have to buy a smoke tester to do that and or make one. So that's something that we'll look forward to doing in the future, maybe. Another major thing that I think that it could be is a bad mass airflow sensor. So I have cleaned this mass airflow sensor like a million times, and it's still having the same idling issue. That was one of the first things I thought of when I first started experiencing this idle issue. I'm just not sure. It doesn't seem like it's reading the temperatures as anything that I wouldn't expect. The temperature that the intake air temperature that it's reading, according to the data log, is basically really similar to the ambient air temperature outside. So it doesn't seem to have signs of being bad in that way, but it could still be reading incorrectly in another parameter, and that could be causing the issue. Another thing that's possible is dirty and therefore bad O2 sensors. And in particular, the upstream O2 sensors, which are essentially the wideband sensors in this case. It's possible that they're reading incorrectly and are causing the car to run lean and or rich, at least in some instances. I haven't got any codes that would lead me to believe that these sensors are necessarily bad, at least not for a while. I did get a code quite a while back that was for, I think it was bank 1 being read as too lean. So that could be an issue with the wideband sensor, but I've only got that once, and like I said, the data log files seem to be reading fine, which if the sensor is just reading completely incorrectly and making adjustments, I suppose it would be reading fine, but it could still be bad in that case though. So I don't know. Again, that's why this is so difficult, because there's like a million different possibilities. When you look it up, this is such a common problem with like just a bunch of different solutions that don't work for every particular case, but might work for another one. But moving on, another potential one is bad VCT solenoids. Again, you would probably normally get a code. Supposedly, it doesn't always happen, but VCT solenoids can cause a lot of different issues. They can cause misfiring, supposedly. And a really, really big symptom is issues with a rough idle. I haven't gotten the code. I don't have anything that specifically makes me think it would be the VCT solenoid over something else other than the rough idle. That's probably one of the last things I would replace or try to do if we go into diagnosing this further, which we will. So when it comes to potential fixes, here's the major things that we're gonna be doing. It needs a vacuum test of some sort. A vacuum smoke test would be the most convenient and easy to tell where an issue is, probably. That is something that I might do. I also might do, my dad has a regular vacuum pressure tester, and we can see if there's some sort of leak that's happening from that at least as well. So that might be something that I do first, because that'll at least tell me if there is an issue, and then it can be figured out where exactly that issue is in the future, to make sure that none of these random vehicles passing come and scoop up my dog. The boy. Here comes the boy. Hello, boy. Welcome. There he is. But a vacuum leak is the biggest one that I think could potentially be an issue. It seems most likely that that would affect something like the idle, but not affect something like the higher RPM performance in that way as much. I know it certainly can in some cases, but if it's not a super bad or super noticeable vacuum leak or PCV issue, then maybe that's why it's affecting it in that way. I'm just not sure. My other biggest suspicion is probably an MAF sensor. It seems like an easy place to go from there, and after that is potentially the upstream O2 sensors. I am getting a code for the downstream O2 sensors that the system is inefficient, which makes sense because it has long tube headers and high flow cats. So obviously it's not going to read as what the factory system probably would. And that is another potential issue that could be causing this, is a bad catalytic converter. I highly doubt that's what the issue is though, because A, I don't know how long these long tube headers and cats have been on this car. I doubt that the cats are clogged or anything like that. Way down the line, that's something I could consider. I think that the upstream O2 sensors could very well be reading incorrectly. Normally, there's other issues that also happen when it comes to the upstream O2 sensor having issues. It's not just an idle issue. There'd normally be like a code or something. We're not getting that in this case, so I'm not 100% sure that that's what it is. And then the last thing where it could be, but again, I have my suspicions about, is the VCT solenoids. They're not super difficult to replace, so if it comes to that, then we can replace them, but that's the thing that I'd like to replace the least, and I just don't honestly think is probably the issue. And what's so frustrating is that the car generally runs really well and like it should. It's just that this small issue has become so frustrating because of how difficult it is to determine what is causing it. So with that being said, we will figure this out in the future sometime, certainly. I will not stop trying until I do. And enjoy the rest of this video, which includes an oil change of this beautiful, perfectly running, and in supremely most beautiful condition vehicle. I don't even know how I started this sentence, so I don't know how to end it at this point. Car get oil change, you watch oil change if want to, watch finish video. And on to the next clip. What we're gonna do is stop by the store, get some oil because this car needs its first oil change since my ownership. We are just over where I was planning on changing the oil mileage wise, so might as well do it right now. And while we're under there, get a look at the O2 sensors, see what sort of spacer there is space for. Essentially, I don't want to ram the O2 sensors into something else. And just generally take a look at everything down there and see what we can figure out. I'm planning on taking this car on vacation that I'm going to be going on shortly. Like this weekend, which might be when you're seeing this video, Saturday is when I'm going to be gone, which is the 2nd. So I'll be taking this car, I mean, over the course of this trip for hundreds of miles. Obviously, I haven't owned this car for that long. I don't know anything about its history or its service history even, really. It seems to run generally good. It seems healthy, but what all has been replaced and what needs to be replaced soon is a little bit more of a mystery. So let's go ahead and head to the store and get the oil for this thing. We're gonna be taking the boring mobile to do so, and then we'll get into the rest of this video, I suppose, see what we can figure out underneath the car. Speaking of underneath the car, I highly doubt that the jack can get under the front bumper and jack up the car from the front, even though it's a long reach, low profile. I'll try, but I kind of have my doubts about whether or not that's gonna work. And I also don't have any ramps right now. So I might have to do something really dumb and weird and jack up one side of the car, put that side on jack stands, and then jack up the other side of the car. Not what you would normally do for an oil change, but that might be the only thing that works. So, I don't know. Let's go to the store and let's figure out what we're gonna do. I guess time will tell what exactly ends up happening as we work on the car, but let's see what we can figure out today and if there's anything that we can do to help out the car as it sits, possibly before taking it hundreds of miles on a trip. But this thing doesn't have cruise control, and I'm sorry, but I'm used to having cruise control, and I'm a baby about not having cruise control when I'm driving for hours. And so the Mustang, despite having much worse fuel economy and being generally less practical, seems to be my go-to vehicle for long trips. We're back. We got the beautiful AC Delco PF63. I was gonna put on a Motorcraft filter, but they did not have literally the only one they were out of is the one that I needed. So they recommend you put AC Delco PF63 on the 5.3 V8s that come in like the Sierras and Silverados and stuff like that when you get an oil change at a dealership. So if it's good enough for GM, I guess it's good enough for me. And I'll get something probably better next time. And we got Valvoline high mileage genuine full synthetic, I don't know why I said genuine, that's literally not anywhere in the title, wine box, because this thing takes 900 quarts of oil and or 8. That's still a lot though. So let's go ahead and get this baby moved into the middle of the garage so that we can jack it up how we're probably going to need to and get started with this oil change. But I think a general goal that I have with this oil change is just to get a look at where the upstream O2 sensors are, how easy they are to reach, and how much space I have to put on a spacer if needed, which it probably is needed. I don't know, man, it's all just kind of a guessing game. Give it a good rock. Make sure it's stable. Okay, we're good. And welcome to episode 372 of Colton wishes that he had a creeper, but he hasn't bought one yet. I just throw these on the ground, which are basically fender covers, and they sorta kinda help-ish. It's been a long time since I've had a car that's this low. Also, when I had my Subaru, about, I don't know, probably half the oil changes I did was when I was working at the dealership, so I was spoiled with a lift. I no longer am spoiled with a lift, and now I'm doing this like a peasant, like all of you, for instance. It's good to be back, just not really though. All right, hat has come off for this oil change, which means that temporarily so has dignity, but let's go ahead and grab the drain pan, get it under there, and start doing it, and I'm gonna guess that this is a 15mm drain plug based off of basically nothing, and it being a Ford, it might be something that no other brand does for drain plug because they like to be different for no apparent reason. Let's find out. Oh no, there's a spider with a piece of fluff stuck to its body. That's both tragic and hilarious. Well, we are done underneath the car. Honestly, not too bad of an oil change. Got our jug filled up to 8 quarts, so let's go ahead and put this in, and then we can start it up. And this thing always is stressful to use because the nozzle broke off. So when you're all the way up to 8 quarts, it's a little nerve-wracking. Okay, we'll pop the cap back on, check our oil level, and then we should be able to start it up and make sure everything's all right. So that was 8 quarts, and that's reading a tiny bit high. So I assume if we start it up and get all that oil flowing into the filter, because I didn't fill the filter before putting it on. I don't normally do that unless it's like straight up and it's really easy to, but otherwise it just ends up making a mess, and the filter running dry for a split second is probably not gonna make that big of a difference, all things considered. Let's go ahead and start it and make sure everything is still working, and then we will go from there. This probably won't come through in video, but I mean, you can hear that there's literally just a little bit less valve train noise, because Coyotes are just generally kind of clicky sounding motors. It's just sort of how they are. So it sounds just a little bit better. It's also super funny seeing this thing all the way up in the air like this. But yeah, I mean, everything seems fine. All right, oil level is looking good after several minutes of sitting here, and we're gonna go ahead and get this thing back on the ground and close this video out. So the Mustang oil change is done. It's back down on the ground. I rechecked the oil level. Everything seems to all be in order, and I easily could have just left this out, edited this out of the video, this mistake that I made, but honestly, it's kind of hilarious, so I'm gonna go ahead and tell you guys. When I was dropping the Mustang back down, I thought I had everything out from under there other than the fender covers that I was using to rest on so my back didn't get just ridiculously dirty on the floor. But I made a mistake and I left something under there that is incredibly obvious, and I don't know why I didn't grab it beforehand, which was the oil drain pan, and I left it under there, and it's designed to, you know, hold all of the liquid and be able to be sealable, but I still had it cracked open so that oil could drip into it and whatever in the first place. I just still had it like that, and I had the filter sitting on top of it so the filter could continue to drain. Like the old filter. The car already has a new oil in it, but the old filter was upside down on it so it could drain the rest of its fluid out as it's sitting there. And I lowered the car down, and the filter sticking up was enough that it went into the cross member on the car and squished the oil drain pan down and went poof. In fact, you can hear what that sounded like here. So immediately I knew something was up. I'm like, what was that sound? But what that did was go and shoot oil all under the car after I had a very successful clean oil change. Because of course, every time, it's like a ritual at this point of at-home oil changes. No matter how clean of an oil change, like the bulk of the oil change I do, I will do something at some point afterward that will be just as messy if I had just done a terrible job with the oil change. But otherwise, the car is done. We did the oil change and everything, and we're just gonna have to continue monitoring the whole situation with whatever is going on with the idle and the O2 sensors. We'll do a vacuum test in the future and just see if we can figure out what's going on, because genuinely the car runs really good most of the time. It's just the few occasions where it has issues that are so puzzling. So continue as we figure this out in the future. I think we are most of the way there. We know it can only be a handful of things, and that's good, and we're gonna figure them out in the future. So thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video and you'd like to see future content from me and on my Mustang GT, please consider subscribing to the channel. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I very much appreciate the support, and I will see you guys in the next one. Holy humidity! Jeez!